have a lot of respect for conservatives and Republicans. They work as a counterbalance to the liberal side of this country. We need them, because in America we debate opposing viewpoints to find the truth somewhere in the middle. This doesn't work with the Tea Party, because they come from such a far fringe faction of the right that it throws that counterbalance out of whack. There's no finding common ground with this wackiness. They are not interested in debating opposing viewpoints to find the truth somewhere in the middle. So what motivates this group of 90+% or so white old folks to gather and form the Tea Party? And what is it about our current president that gives this group such a resentful, salty attitude? We'll explore these questions with wacky consequences in this episode of Fun with Teabagging. Why are these crackers so salty? Whatever the topic, these Tea Partiers are incredibly motivated. Whether they're telling me a secret government plot to put a secretly Muslim, secretly Kenyan man in the office of president, or another devious government plot to turn us into communist Russia by raising taxes 3% on the richest 1%, there is no denying that these guys are incredibly passionate about their cause. Whatever that is. As a wise man once said,
"He really seems to care. About what, I have no idea."
It's debt that's got them upset, right? I mean, when they're not hollering about white people being oppressed, Kenyans, and a government coming to take their guns, it's the national debt that's got them so salty and angry, right? But wait! Were conservatives angry at Reagan for driving up the debt? Heck no, they still idolize him. How about when Bush Sr. did it? No, I don't recall a Tea Party forming back then. How about when Bush Jr. took Clinton's surplus into a deficit? Did that inspire a group of elderly white folks to rally together and form the Tea Party? No. How about when Bush proceeded to build up the debt through bailouts in his last year, multiplying it exponentially? I don't recall the Tea Party forming at all during Bush's term, actually. They say they didn't form until 2009. Honestly, if these guys have such a problem with debt, wouldn't they have protested under any president? No. The people who are now the Tea Party did not bother to protest the debt when it raised several 100% in Bush's term. But you don't have to take my word for it.
Like Bush, when he took the deficit to $4 trillion from the surplus, and then there were all these not tasteful protests happening. Right. Yeah. But I'm sure there's tasteful people and not tasteful people. But were you ever at any of those protests?
And discourage all of America.
When Bush was in office, and they took the deficit up $4 trillion. Were you at any of those rallies? They existed. They were everywhere. People were there with the Nazi signs and all that.
I didn't see that. Apparently it wasn't our
So, if they didn't have a problem with spending when these guys were driving up the debt, why are they so furious when Obama inherits it? It must be something he did to drive it up, right? Let's take a look at the current deficit. The TARP bailouts were enacted under the Bush administration. That was the bailout money given out with absolutely no strings attached. But Bush was in office, and there was no Tea Party revolt. A lot of teabaggers confuse the TARP bailouts with the auto industry bailouts that are being paid back, and Obama's stimulus package, that one that reversed Bush's economic downfall. Instead of raising taxes to pay for the war, the Bush administration decided to cut taxes for the wealthiest, adding hundreds of billions of dollars to the deficit. And those tax cuts didn't create new jobs. As it turns out, those rich people really liked that extra money and decided to keep it. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer, and while Bush was in office, there was no Tea Party revolt. Oh, and this part's my favorite. Under Obama, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars are included in calculating the projected deficit. Before now, those costs were put into a separate emergency spending bill called supplementals. You mean we actually acknowledge the cost of the wars, and the projected deficit goes up? Imagine that. When Bush was in office, there was no Tea Party revolt. But when Obama puts the cost of the wars on the books, the Tea Partiers begin to turn against them. So if the wars, the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy, the TARP bailouts, and the economic downturn are all inherited from the previous administration, along with their costs, all as a matter of public record, why, now, only under Obama, are these crackers so salty?
Did Obama cut taxes for 90% of Americans as promised? No. And,
They must be mad at taxes, right? TEA for taxed enough already? The tax day protests? Oh, but wait. Taxes are at a 50-year low. But you don't have to take my word for it. Taxes are at their lowest in 50 years, and it's not me saying this, it's the Treasury Department, the Congressional Budget Office, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, Reagan's old economic advisors, every tax return of the last few years. Every halfway official group that handles taxes in any sort of way can tell you that taxes are at a 50-plus year low. Oh, and that stimulus that the Tea Party has been protesting? Guess what made up the largest portion of Obama's stimulus? You guessed it, more tax cuts. So every major US financial institution, every expert you can cite with any sort of credibility, including the ones who worked under Reagan, who say, and I quote, that taxes are at their lowest under any conceivable measure, all say that taxes are at a 50-year low under Obama. So the Tea Partiers either have to believe that it's a worldwide conspiracy to make them look stupid, or the Tea Party's really full on this issue. So honestly, what makes these crackers so salty? They must have a legitimate reason that can't be proven false by facts and logic, right?
does Obamacare add to the
What we say on the radio is, are you ready?
Yes.
They're salty about that new healthcare bill, right? What they call Obamacare, even though it was conceived and drafted by Congress and not the president. Obamacare, right? But wait, if government giving people a free healthcare ride was the issue, what about President Bush's Medicare entitlement program, which, by the way, actually costs us money? No Tea Party revolt back then, which is pretty interesting considering President Bush's Medicare entitlement program costs money in the long run. Meanwhile, Obamacare actually cuts waste to save money. A plan the CBO says decreases the deficit by over $130 billion over the first 10 years, and over $1 trillion in the next 10, while also, on top of that, increases coverage. That's out of the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the same guys that the Republicans use for their bills. Oh, and the single-payer mandate that is Obamacare? Conservatives supported it in the 90s, 4 of whom became GOP 2012 presidential candidates. Pawlenty, Gingrich, Huntsman, Romney. The other GOP candidates criticized Romney because Obamacare was literally modeled after Romneycare. Some parts were taken word for word, just copied, literally. So it must be the devious government death panels that's got the Tea Party so salty, right?
Are you ready
What
to
are death
fundamentally reform
Death panels is
America?
when doctors actually have to go before some kind of a government forum to determine what they can and cannot do for a patient.
On the line
So inevitably it's going to phase people out who they just don't want around.
The secret government death panels that the government's using to kill people who they just don't want around? Here's the evidence, right here. The death panel conspiracy is based on this evidence you see right here. But Obamacare is death panels, Nazi communism, Kenya! Okay, something tells me that it's not a thorough reading of the healthcare law and deep, insightful research of it that's got these Tea Partiers so salty. Something tells me that's not really what has them angry. But what else is there to be afraid of? I've got it. How about government coming to take their guns?
So yes, I believe that the left-wing extreme agenda that now occupies my White House would
If I wanted to
take
find
my
a...
guns.
When you read the Declaration of Independence, it talks about when the government becomes a tyrant, the guns are there to take over the government, in effect. It's not just for hunting rabbits or whatever. But one of the first things that happens in like Hitler or whatever in Germany, they disarm the people.
Yeah. Taking guns literally from where they have them, from their surplus.
He wants to do everything to take control away from people. Any way, shape, or form.
On this event. It is really...
Now all of you clear out of here!
They all make thoughtful, valid points, but let's take a look at the record. Well, this is going to be a quick one, as President Obama has never proposed, sponsored, or hinted at any sort of gun regulation at all. Actually, one bill did cross the president's desk, and he signed it. It capped interest credit rates and lifted Reagan-era gun restrictions. Lifted Reagan-era gun restrictions. On the other hand, you have the argument that government coming to take my guns. So if the gun argument really doesn't hold water, then the Tea Party must be upset at the fact that the president is obviously, secretly, Muslim, right?
Do you believe Barack Obama is possibly Muslim?
He's the one going to ask me no more questions. He just sent in his tax form.
Cool. Based on
the fact that he won't sign up to any Christian values. I mean, essentially he's pushed everything on the side. The day of prayer he wouldn't participate in. He has basically done everything he can to almost say, I'm not Christian.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. He's done all he can to say that he's not Christian. Except, he does say that he's Christian. But, you don't have to take my word for it.
You know, I'm a Christian by choice.
What does that mean to you? What does it mean to you to trust in Christ? And what does that mean on a daily basis? I mean, what does that really look like?
Well, as a starting point, it means I believe in that Jesus Christ died for my sins and that I am redeemed through him.
We have Jews, Muslims, Hindus, atheists, agnostics, Buddhists, and that their own path to grace is one that we have to revere and respect as much as our own, and that's part of what makes this country what it is.
So, why are these crackers so salty? I mean, what, do they see Obama's economic plans as reparations against white people?
Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck have both referred to Obama's economic program as reparations, referring, I guess, to the slavery reparations.
Redistribution of wealth, that whole concept, and who's it being redistributed?
Uh-huh. Listen close, folks, because we may actually be getting close to discovering their motivation.
Oh, Beck said that he believes this guy, Obama, is a racist. She said on Fox News, July 28th, 2009.
Officials who don't understand
who
we are. Those who understand who we are grateful for our president.
Yes, I would say that. Cool. And the reason why I say that is the blacks put him in office. Therefore he is more dedicated to the black community than he would be the white community. Cool.
You know that only 1 out of 6 black people can trace their race to Africa, their roots to Africa.
Son of a... You hear that? That is that good old-fashioned down-south racial ignorance that you can only get from Tea Party organizers. According to the U.S. Census, the numbers are actually about the opposite of what she's saying. In fact, about 87% of black Americans can trace their race to Africa, according to the census. Now, to say that only 1 out of 6 black people can trace their roots to Africa can be pretty appalling to most Americans. But, mind you, this is coming from the Tea Party. These are the guys who had a hard time getting their heads around the fact that the first black president was actually from America.
Do you believe, as Hannity Limbaugh said that it's a legitimate question, is the word that they kept using, as to whether or not Barack Obama was born in the United States?
Absolutely, and it's constitutionally mandated. So yes, and how hard is it to show me his birth certificate?
the list goes on, believe that his citizenship should be questioned. Barack Obama.
I don't think that's been resolved. At least not to my satisfaction.
Now, we had all this open to the public, but the Tea Party argued that any evidence that was shown was just part of a giant worldwide conspiracy. Less proof of birth was offered by every other president in U.S. history, but for some reason, this particular president needed even more evidence. So the president took time out of his day to release this, what the hospital called a less official document, the proof of birth long-form birth certificate. Let's take note that at this point, while the birther conspiracy was at its highest point in the news, our president was in the final planning stages to get Osama bin Laden. While staying quiet about the daily briefings, planning how not to mess this up like the last guy did, and finally get America's #1 enemy, he had to give a press conference about his legitimacy as a U.S. citizen. Now, some in his position might have been a little bit insulted by the whole thing, but instead of giving a giant middle finger to all the bigots out there who he was also trying to protect, he just got up there on the podium and said,
"We do not have time for this kind of silliness. We got better stuff to do. I've got better stuff to do. We got big problems to solve, and I'm confident we can solve them, but we're going to have to focus on them."
2 days later, Osama bin Laden was killed. So, here we have a group of Archie Bunker impersonators protesting hypocritical platforms while repeating the mantra, "I want my country back." The Tea Party says they aren't racist because, after all, they'll pay a black bishop to come give racist hate speeches at otherwise totally Caucasian rallies. Seriously, I've trolled there. The truth is, if you told these guys that there was going to be a president who had a picture-perfect family life, cut taxes to their lowest point in over 50 years, smokes Marlboro Reds, reversed an economic freefall, the very personification of a man pulling himself out by his bootstraps and making something of himself, and finally got Osama bin Laden, these guys would love him. If a person is all those things plus black, well then he's a socialist Kenyan, isn't he? Or maybe they're just salty because their oversimplified views just don't seem to hold water when matched up against reason and logic. Maybe they're upset that after emerging from their Cold War bomb shelters, these people are joining the public stage to see their own ignorance reflected back at them by a rational America that sees them and laughs. Maybe they're upset that their Revolutionary War fetish just comes off as a little bit freaky. Maybe, through their series of oversimplified arguments, they've exposed themselves as just a bunch of ignorant, racist, sore losers. I would be salty too, if I came off as this stupid.
I heard that they're sending tea bags to the White House, like people are actually mailing them to the White House, just flooding it with tea bags. He was saying that they're teabagging the White House.
I've heard that, and I've done it on the telephone to our congressman, and
teabag the congressman. Very cool.
Sending pictures of tea bags up there rather than tea bags.
Oh, nice.
Because they're afraid that they wouldn't get in the White House.
Ah, very sneaky.
But that's the idea.
Very sneaky. Taking the pictures of your tea bags and sending them up.